Welcome to the Self-Storage Made Simple podcast. I am Thaddeus Campbell, your host, joined today by somebody I met a few weeks ago in San Diego at a mastermind event and blew my mind. He gave a presentation, a young guy that he had his stuff together so well. I couldn't help but go up to him right after he's done and say, hey man, I want to have you come on the podcast and share a bunch of what you've done. So really proud to welcome Sean Graham, founder of Maven. Let me get that right. Maven's got a bunch of different aspects to it, and we're going to dig into all of that, Sean. I'm going to give you a chance to tell us a little bit about Maven and the iterations of it, because it seems like you're kind of a serial entrepreneur. If I had to put a label on you, you find niches and you go in and start businesses to address them. So I want to, first of all, thank you for taking some time and coming and joining me on the podcast.
Thanks, Thaddeus. I appreciate it. That's a very kind introduction. And yeah, man, it was great meeting you over at the Mastermind in that conference. I had a lot of fun just speaking to the group, getting to know everybody. And those things always lead to a lot of great connections. So I was super glad I went out there.
Very, very cool to have met you and heard you. And I always start the podcast with the same question because we're connected through self-storage, and it's such a unique asset class, such a unique group of people, industry on the whole. So I'm always interested to know how people found themselves getting into self-storage.
Yeah, of course. So my background, I was in accounting and I was in finance, and on the side, I was investing in real estate. So I was house hacking, I was buying duplexes, triplexes, and I really, I loved it, but I wanted to scale and I wanted to get into commercial real estate. So it's like, okay, well, what do you do? How do you get into commercial real estate? And so for me, I really like creative financing and creative structures. And so when I learned about the SBA loan, I was like, okay, that's a good avenue where I can break into commercial real estate. I don't have to have this long track record and have, raise or syndicate millions of dollars immediately. I can get in with a couple partners, have a fairly low down payment loan. And that's because the SBA views it as a business. It's not just real estate to them. It's a business. So it's one of those things where we get all of the tax benefits of real estate, but from a financing perspective, especially with an SBA loan, they look at it as a business, and which it really is. It is a business. So that's the asset class I chose. And I mean, I think you can go down, you can really choose whatever you want. You can be successful in really any type of commercial real estate, or just sticking with residential real estate. But self-storage really stood out to me. And so it was during COVID, actually, that I just transitioned fully into self-storage, and I haven't looked back. So now everything I do really has stemmed from self-storage. It's either self-storage itself or it's directly related to my experience within self-storage.
I was thinking about that as I was thinking about the things I wanted to talk to you about. You've really kind of vertically integrated, and I called you a serial entrepreneur, but really the things you've started have been to help your self-storage business. And I'm going to get into that again. I keep promising, and I'm going to get into a couple of things you do, but I'm interested to know why self-storage was the thing that you ended up settling on. You could have gone into, multifamily residential. There are other commercial asset classes out there. What was it about self-storage that drew you to it?
Yeah, I just got the bug. I think I was listening to a podcast, and it might have been a Scott Meyers podcast or another one. And I once I understood the asset class and the simplicity of it, it really just spoke to me. I'm like, that's the business. I think from a management perspective too, we're just renting sheds. We're renting metal sheds, really. It's not that complicated. So yes, you can get into the complications of how to really maximize the value of the asset, which is what we do. But at the end of the day, it's not rocket science. We're not inventing anything. And it's just a lower maintenance asset class than multifamily. So you're not dealing with long-term tenants. You don't typically, right? It's very rare that you have to evict somebody unless somebody's living in a unit, which rarely happens. The financing, like I mentioned, is great. There's a lot of great financing options. And it was just a very attractive asset class that I think a lot of people had interest in. and it was growing quickly, and it still is. So uh, after, yeah, I think it was just a decision. After hearing that podcast, I just decided like this is what I'm going into, and this is what I want to do. And so I just poured all of my energy into understanding self storage, um, connecting with owners, building lists and relationships, connecting with bankers, financing, and then just listening to every piece of material I could find and reading every book I could find. And that's how I ended up in self storage.
I love that so much, and ended up finding yourself at scale. It was a Scott Myers mastermind that we were at out in San Diego. Ended up making that connection and getting to speak out there,
Right.
which again I'm grateful for because it was really interesting. And what you talked about when you were out there were two things that are businesses that you've started, but that are helpful to somebody who's operating a self storage business. So the first thing I want to talk to you about a little bit is near and dear to my heart. We were talking before we actually started taping. My guy Eric, who originally was a virtual assistant for me 4 years ago, he's been working with me now for 4 years. No longer, I don't really consider him a virtual assistant. He's more my guy, like takes care of all the things I need done. But you went through the process of hiring virtual assistants for your storage business and decided that there was an opportunity there to start a business and help other storage owners in that. So take me down that path and what led you to do that.
Yeah, so I think like a lot of people, whether you're working a W-2 or you're in real estate full time, your time is very finite. It's very limited, and I my background is in accounting and finance. I wanted to control a lot of that perspective, um, and I also wanted to like learn the business in detail, and I wanted to connect with owners. I wanted to raise capital. I wanted to do everything, and then quickly learn, hey, like I can't do everything, or I can, but then I'm just switching gears, right? And so as soon as I switch gears into something else, I'll switch gears and go into acquisitions. Well, then property management falls off, or maybe like accounting falls behind, right? And so I just, I realized like there's people overseas who would gladly do the same work for me at like a fraction of the cost. And not only that, but there's people who are smarter than you are, or that you can teach, people with great backgrounds worldwide, um, who can do it, who can do just as good of a job as you, or perhaps even a better job. And so I started hiring virtual assistants. I started hiring on Upwork, actually. That's where I started. And Upwork was good. The the problem became that I was often overpaying for an underqualified hire. I'd find somebody, I would pay double the rate that I should have been. I just didn't know the market, didn't know true market values, and uh, I would waste a lot of time training. And so when you hire somebody full time, you hire them at even like $15 an hour for like an acquisitions manager, and you're hiring them direct, and then you spend 6 months with them. This starts adding up, right? For a full time person, and I quickly realized that that wasn't the way to go, and that I needed to go through an actual thorough vetting system and process to find the truly qualified hires and get them at true market value. So I I did this internally, and I have over 10 people overseas working for me from different countries: India, Egypt, Philippines. We've hired people in South America as well, Central America, um, and throughout the Middle East. But I then realized like other people need the same things, and I couldn't afford to pay U.S. based people, or U.S. based accountants or acquisitions managers or salespeople, anything like that. So I would train my team and then offload a piece of that, onto somebody. And then I'd slowly build up that person's skill set so that they're getting better and better and better. Like my accountant, right? So she started off just doing the bookkeeping. And that was it. And then we slowly got into underwriting, and we slowly got into forecasting and budgeting, and then payroll and all these other things. So that even though, again, I said like my background's in accounting, I don't have to do the details anymore. I can just I can just have her do the work, but I oversee that work and make sure that like everything it's still in place. I can, request changes. It's like having somebody on your team from the US, like your own in-house CFO or your own in-house CPA. And then other people started asking me about hiring overseas. How do they do that? How can, how do you find deals? And I'm all about leverage. So it was more pushing people towards hiring overseas. And what I realized, like, there was a business opportunity here to actually go out and find people for other companies, because that takes time in itself. We get an average of about 600 applicants per job post that we put out, and to vet everybody based on resumes, to vet them on their skills, to vet them on their English fluency levels, to do one-on-one interviews with everyone. It takes a lot of work to narrow down that pool of people. And the funny thing is 90% are not on Upwork. 90% of the people that we have apply, they're not on Upwork, they're not on Fiverr, and that's because they're not freelancers, they're not contractors. They are human beings who have careers, and they're either in a career right now or they're looking for a new career. Yeah. So we have a pretty robust recruiting platform now where we vet everyone, and we have guarantees in place, but the goal is to help other people hire the right person. We guarantee retention, quality, and get them the right person at the right price point. Now, we have fees associated with that. Like, we have a placement fee. Either we kind of work two ways. It's either a one-time placement fee, or we just go month to month and we have an upcharge in there. So either way, it kind of is up to the person to choose how they want to move forward. And the one-time fee is less expensive in the long run. It's just a bigger cash outlay up front. But that's what we did, and started working with other people in self-storage. And self-storage is really like the bread and butter. That's where most of the people we work with come from. They're related to the self-storage industry in some way. But outside of self-storage too, there's, just single-family home investors, people who fix and flip, and then other businesses even outside of real estate. Like, he was in Hawaii. He has a t-shirt company, and he just needs somebody who's really good at graphic design and knew this specific software for designing t-shirts. And so we went and found him that person overseas. So it's kind of funny the people you end up meeting and the different businesses you're exposed to. But yeah.
I've got to apologize, because in the middle of that, my mind started racing. I told you I got Eric behind the camera here, and shout out to Eric, because everyone that's watching the podcast, the reason the podcast looks so good, all the editing and things that happen, right, that's Eric. It is not me. I have nothing to do with that. But while you were talking, I was thinking about all the things in our business with Safe Storage USA that we could use somebody, but you nailed it, right? If I want to go hire someone in the US, I'm a math guy, and I can spend my time underwriting each and every deal that I look at. But my skill set is going and finding pieces of land. I want to spend as much time doing that as I can. I don't want to be running an underwriting model. But if I were to hire someone in the US to do that underwriting for me, it'd be cost prohibitive.
Right, exactly. We've kind of, all these things take time. I think if you are unwilling to invest in that person and build up that person's skill set, and you just want a turnkey solution, well, your chances of finding success are a lot lower. But if you hire somebody, and given a lot of people overseas, like, they have the skill set, they have the intangibles, but they don't have the same background that you have, or we might have here in the US, or the exposure to real estate. They're working overseas. So there's a lot to learn. But if you invest in those people, build up those skill sets, then it just keeps compounding, over time, over months, over years, and you end up with some very good employees and hires. And I'm at the point now, like, for acquisitions, I have one guy who, he does all the calling. He does the calling, he manages the CRM, he builds the relationships, and he does basic underwriting. And his goal is to find either qualified self-storage facilities, or to find land that we could develop self-storage facilities on. And at first, he would just, anybody who was willing to talk, it's like, hey, Sean, like I'll set up an appointment for you to talk to this person. And
Yep.
then it would be this low class facility, and the guy would want $200 a square foot for this facility. And I'm like, this is a complete waste of time, right?
Right.
Like we could have known this in the beginning. So you start building out criteria that your acquisitions manager can handle, can check off, and know up front. And then that weeds out all of the potential meetings and time where like it would just be a waste of time. You can weed all those out, and then you can just meet people who are actually qualified. Same thing with land. I think I mentioned this story when we were over in San Diego at that conference, but I was doing due diligence on a piece of land where, no, it wasn't land, it was a building. And the building, I was going to convert it into self storage. I went very far down the due diligence track. And I spent weeks looking at this deal, negotiating this deal, visited it. And then I found out it was in a flood zone. And if my acquisition manager had done that up front and just had that checklist, had that criteria, he would have known within an hour of getting off the phone with the guy, going through all of the material, that this is not going to happen. It's in a flood zone. We don't want to do this deal.
Yeah.
So you have to build out the systems. You have to build out the criteria for people to be successful, and then enable them and keep teaching them. But then that all comes back to you, and you're able to delegate more and more. And so even on the underwriting portion of it, my accountant, she does the detailed underwriting. And like I mentioned before, at first she was just doing bookkeeping. She was just managing the LLCs, managing the QuickBooks, but now she does the financial statements. She gives me financial statement summaries every single month. We compare budget versus actuals versus prior year. We're looking at revenue. We're looking at profits, and we're looking at just facility statistics. But she's able to give all that to me, and then I can dive in at a high level, right, without doing all of the work to just get to that reporting. And then it goes beyond that, where she can do the due diligence and the underwriting on potential deals or self-storage deals, and she can look at comps. She can calculate the square foot per capita based on drive time or circular radius, and she can underwrite the financing, bank financing, SBA financing, or syndication type of financing, or raising capital. She can do all those things because she has the material, and we've kind of built up that skill set. And then for me, I can come in from a high level and say, okay, this looks great, but like change X, Y, and Z, change the interest rate. Your expenses are too low on management over here. And okay, this looks good, but I think cap rate should actually be 7% cap rate as opposed to 6.5% cap rate. And a lot of times I'll just get on WhatsApp and I will just leave a voice memo. It's maybe a 10-minute voice memo, just walking through all of the changes. She has it. She can re-listen to it. She can make all those changes, and she can go back to it again and again. And I found that has been a little bit easier than trying to type everything out or schedule a meeting, and then the meeting is 3 or 4 times that length. She can just go make these changes, come back to me, give them to me, and then I review again, and I can make more changes. I'm not saying like we don't meet. We do. I meet with every single person who's more of like head of a department overseas, like once a week, and I meet with my entire team weekly as well. So do the one-on-one meetings and do the group team meetings, and those help a ton also.
I'm like, you're giving so much knowledge here, and I'm personally learning so much from listening to how you're operating people. But you said something that really struck me, and I guess it goes to the mindset of people that are really successful, right? Everyone talks about this idea of time freedom, and I want to capture my time, but the reality is, in order to get time freedom, and what that really means is you get to dedicate your time to the things that are the most important for you to be concentrating on. You're spending a lot of time on the front end getting somebody else to a place where they can replace your time in things that aren't as necessary for you to be doing. It's not easy. Like, you're investing time on the front end to gain yourself
Right.
significant amounts of time on the back end.
Right. No, that's completely correct. It's an investment, and what you start to realize is that you don't just free up time to do nothing. You just as an entrepreneur, you just end up leveraging your time into higher and better uses. And a lot of my time now, which is I'm shifting more towards this, and it's really like connecting with people, or going and talking to people, or getting on a podcast like this, going to the mastermind, meeting people, um, or talking to individuals who potentially might need to hire overseas, or they might need to um, hire for we have a cost segregation company too, right? And like might need
I was
those
just
needs, or talk
laughing
to
because we're 20
investors.
minutes into this podcast that I always keep to 30 minutes long. And we haven't even gotten to the point of why I
Yeah,
brought you on originally,
I
which
know.
is cost
Sorry, I can talk,
segregation.
man.
But
I can talk.
no,
Yeah,
listen, I love it because you're giving really valuable information. And here's the great part. I can always have you come back on at another time and we could talk for another 30
let's do
minutes.
it.
But yeah, I
Let's do
love
it.
it. Let's dig into that because, as I said, you kind of have this symbiotic deal with Maven where you've started a couple of other businesses that are ancillary to storage. And I was really intrigued because the cost segregation business was what you were really talking about mostly when you were with us in San Diego. Tell me how you got into that. And you're doing it a little differently than most people do cost segregation. So take me through that.
Right. So my background's as a CPA. So I was doing, I was working with people who had real estate and the depreciation schedules, and we would review cost seg studies, all of that. That was a prior life. Excuse me. And then I left public accounting. I was working in as a financial analyst, and then I started getting into real estate. And then I left my job by W-2, right? I lost my job actually. And I was just in real estate. And then it kind of all circled back. Like it all came full circle where it's like, okay, my background here in accounting and understanding and knowing cost segregation, that applies directly to what we're doing. And there's a bigger need here as well. And so cost segregation studies, they are typically thousands of dollars. You're talking about like four to, maybe $10,000 on average, right? And it just kind of depends on the scope of the work, the size of the property. And there's a lot of people who invest in residential real estate, like single family homes, duplexes, triplexes, where they buy these. They want to accelerate the depreciation of those assets, but they don't want to pay $4,000 or $5,000 for a cost segregation study when they just bought this $400,000 house. And so we developed what we call a modeling study. And so a modeling study is not a detailed study. A detailed study is getting every single detail out of that piece of property. And a modeling study is more of a streamlined method where we're not going to capture every single detail, but we're going to capture that 80-20, meaning like we're getting 80% of the results, and it's 20% of the cost approximately, right? And so we're able to do it at a much lower cost. Self-storage is the same thing, right? You have all of these self-storage facilities that are just basic drive-up self-storage facilities, roll-up doors. They're just, like I said, we're renting metal sheds at the end of the day, and they're not complicated. Like they're not complicated building structures. There's no mechanicals, there's no HVAC, there's no plumbing. They're just metal or block buildings with roll-up doors. So we built out modeling studies for those as well. And it's more of a streamlined version where we are really focused. A lot of the accelerated depreciation comes from land improvements, sidewalks, fencing, pavement, things like that. And then we know exactly what we're looking for inside for those self-storage facilities, like wall pack lights and interior partition walls. And so for climate controlled facilities, like we we advise doing detailed studies, and we don't do the modeling studies on like larger, nicer climate controlled facilities because that's where you have the details. You'll have a bathroom in there, you'll have HVAC, you'll have a lot of costs, and you want to get the most out of everything. And we're going to be able to capture that in a detailed study. Whereas the modeling study, that's more for the basic drive up self storage. So um, that's the idea, is to save people a lot of money and to be able to do cost seg whereas like otherwise they wouldn't do it. They'd say, hey, I just don't want to spend
Yeah.
that amount of money up front here. And we're able to kind of help those people out.
The juice is not worth the squeeze if you're going to spend $8,000 to get a quicker tax depreciation, but the money out of pocket up front just not worth it.
Right, right. That's what it comes down to a lot of times. So, and I get it. I totally get it. And that's what we're doing. So, um, yeah, if anybody needs that, we can definitely help. And our goal is to help everybody in the self storage world do cost segregation studies and do them efficiently, like in a cost efficient manner, and really maximize that bonus depreciation. So I think as a self storage investor myself, I know, we know exactly what we're looking for, and it's very important. We have self storage down very well.
Love that. So there are two things that I absolutely wanted to hit with you. One of them, going totally off the cuff, and it's funny because I thought about this question before I came on, and we were on before we started taping, and you left your spot, and behind you is a little workout area in your office, which is so funny because I was going to ask you about this. You are in great shape, and this is something in 2024, quite frankly, Sean, that I notice about people because it's not the norm anymore. We were out in San Diego, Jeremiah
Right,
Boucher, who's Patriot Holdings, the big owner up in New England, same thing, just in fantastic shape. So I was going to ask you a little bit about your
right.
commitment to physical fitness and how important that is to you. And I guess going one step further, how has that impacted you in your real estate journey and your entrepreneurial journey?
That's a great question. So I was an athlete in high school and in college. I played college football. I was a field goal kicker, so I
Love it.
wasn't out there banging heads with anybody. But at the same time, I was, in the gym all throughout college, all the time. We were working out cardio wise, strength wise, and I played college football. That was part of the reason because I wanted to continue to stay in shape and prioritize that in college and not just drink beer and party and just have fun. I wanted to like maintain physical fitness and so I played football in high school too, and I was a rower as well, crew. And that, if you know anything about that, it's extremely physically intensive. So I was able to maintain physical health going into college, and I think that just kind of set the tone going out of college as well and entering the real world. So I go through different phases. That thing behind me, that's it's the Max Pro. It's this machine. It's not as well advertised. I think Shaq sponsors it, right? And so Shaq always sponsors these things that are a little bit. They can be a nice product, but they're more cost effective, should we say? And it's not like the mirror with LeBron James or something where it's like 10 times the price and just extremely fancy. It's just a simple machine, and I can lift on it. It can do pretty much any lift. It has these bands, and you can do anything arms. It comes with a bench press. I can bench press on it. I can squat. I can put a barbell on there, and front squats, back squats. I can do deadlifts, all these things. And so that helps a lot. I have a toddler at home. He's not even 2 years old, and me and my wife are both at home. So our time is limited. We found out our time is like really limited, and it became a little bit selfish, like feeling like, hey, all right, I'm going to go to the gym now, and I'll be back in an hour and a half or whatever, and like leave you with the crying baby. And this was kind of our solution and compromise where we can get it done in a shorter amount of time, and work out right here. So my wife uses it, I use it, and then I like to run. I just like to get outside. So that's a good way to spend time with the kid too. I put them in the stroller and just go for a run, or I have a couple dogs and go for a run. So I go through different phases of, am I going to, um, run more, or am I going to lift more? And they go back and forth and kind of get bored of them. But recently I've been running a little bit more, and my wife, she's been focused more on the lifting and the Max Pro. But It's
Well,
fun. I
listen,
think it's
next
just
time we
important.
find each other in the same place, we're going to go out on a run. James McLean and I, Thursday morning when we were in San Diego, we went out on a 3 miler. I'm getting ready for a marathon in October. So we're
I
going to
saw
book that.
that.
Next time we're together,
That's
man, we're going to do that for sure. I literally
that's
I have a
fantastic.
little, you can't read this, the chicken scratch I have on my paper because my handwriting stinks. I did not ask a single one of the questions that are on this sheet, which is pretty typical of the
Well, let's come
podcast,
back. Let's do it again.
and we're 30 minutes. So I'm going to ask you for sure that you had so much knowledge and so many things that I think are going to help people watching that are looking to grow their business and maybe just don't know how to do it. And so can't thank you enough for taking the time. So cool to hear your story and have, as I said, have so much more that I want to talk to you about. So we'll do this again sometime in the next few months.
Thank you, Thaddeus. Yeah, you're too kind. I really appreciate you having me on here and asking me to join.
That's it
And
for
it's
this
been a
week's
blast.
episode of the Self Storage Made Simple podcast. I'm sorry, one of us froze there, Sean. So I just started going into the exit. But that's it for this week's episode. Sean Graham, what I'd like you to do before we sign off, what is the easiest way for people that want to get a hold of you, whether it's for cost segregation, whether it's for a virtual assistant, whether it's just because they want to pick your brain about your knowledge of investing in self storage? How do people get a hold of Sean?
Yeah, just email me, Sean, SCAN. I spell it the correct way, I joke. And it's at mavencostseg.com. So Maven is Maven. So Sean at mavencostseg.com. But our websites are mavencostseg.com. That's on the Costseg side. And then I have mavensuccess.com as well. And that's on the overseas headhunting side. So that's the best way to get a hold of me. And yeah, I'll shoot you my calendar link and I'll get on the phone. Happy to chat with anybody, whether it's about self storage or just entrepreneurship or cost seg or overseas hiring. I love connecting with people. So yeah, Thaddeus,
Uh,
thank you so much for having me on here. I appreciate it, man.
It's been my pleasure, man, and I'm so happy that we were together in San Diego and looking forward to, as you said, something really profound, which is building relationships, and that's something I fully believe in. Looking forward to continuing the relationship with you and seeing where it goes. So, listen, that's it for this week's episode of the Self Storage Made Simple podcast. If you got something of value, if you enjoyed the half hour, click the like button. Hit the subscribe button so you get updates on future guests, and you'll see when we bring Sean back on because, as I said, we got a lot more to cover. We'll see you next week. Thank you guys so much for watching.